Hello everybody and welcome back to FantasyFootballFix.com. My name's FPL Phillips and welcome to a very special edition of Eddie versus the Algorithm. Whereas it's the international break in Game Week 9, we're going to be having a look at the optimal wildcard draft that the computer has selected is the best team to go for if you've got unlimited transfers for this week, with some of the best players to own over the next couple of game weeks in this side. And then as always with Eddie versus the Algorithm, I'm going to be putting together my own wildcard draft in this case, and we'll face them off against each other, and you guys can decide down below in the comments whose draft do you prefer, the man or the machine. Let's get into it, shall we? And have a look at how the algorithm team is shaping up if it were on a wildcard for Game Week 9. And kicking it off in this 4-3-3 formation, in goal for the algorithm is going to be Nick Pope, who did seem to be the most popular goalkeeping option for those who were on a Game Week 8 wildcard. To be honest, I think there's more of an argument for picking a different goalkeeper this week, however, with there being some cheaper options than Nick Pope who do look like very promising picks, namely David Breyer at Brentford and also Vincent Gaeta at Crystal Palace, who look very, very nice and of course have passed some of their tricky fixtures and now have some nice promising fixture runs coming up over the next couple of game weeks. And we're looking, to be honest, all the way up to game week 16, where of course due to the World Cup we're all going to have unlimited transfers in this case. And I think Nick Pope, to be honest, is the better goalkeeper option. What's putting me off going for Nick Pope not only is the price difference between him and some of these other goalkeeper options, but also the fact that maybe you don't want a trip double up on a Newcastle defence. And it is another Newcastle defensive asset that we know about, of course, being Kieran Trippier, who looks like a very nice pick as well, and to be honest, is one that I probably want to own in my draft. So maybe not going all in on a Newcastle double up or even a triple up is the way to go at the moment. I think just having one of them at the moment looks like the optimal strategy. And to be honest, if I had to pick one of the bunch, it's going to be the right back of Newcastle, who in fact doesn't make it into this side. We're going to see a back four with three centre-backs in it for the algorithm, meaning Kurt Zuma, we've also got Anderson at Crystal Palace, and then Max Kilman at Wolverhampton Wanderers. So three centre-backs for the algorithm, and it does seem to quite like going for some of these centre-back picks, and it has proven me wrong in previous game weeks when you've been following Eddie versus the algorithm. If you've seen the series, the players like Kilman, when Wolves have kept clean sheets, have been great on the bonus points, and they have actually scored better than the fullbacks and the popular options that seem to be very template selections in FPL at the moment. Cancelo's really kind of almost a must-have on the wild card, to be honest. I know that he's got a blank in game week 12, but you should be able to navigate that, and that's a week where you can kind of afford to bench a defender like Cancelo, as long as you've got some backup options and you're considering who your other defensive assets are and do they have a decent enough fixture in game week 12 so that you can bench the Portuguese man. But the other three centre-backs, to be honest, I wouldn't be going for any of. I don't think Zuma's a great option. Crystal Palace also don't have the best defensive data, just like West Ham. West Ham are actually a bit further up than people would expect. I think they're very much inside the top 10 in terms of expected clean sheets and also in terms of expected goals conceded. So also looks like he's got some decent attacking data. 0.20 expected goals isn't the best, but to be honest, with any West Ham defender, we're not looking promising in terms of attacking data there. Even Vladimir Sufal, who people would consider a more attacking option, only 0.02 ahead of his West Ham counterpart in terms of expected goal involvements. Likewise with Anderson, he does probably look like the best Crystal Palace option to go for. You could save 0.1 and go with Mark Guehi, but if you're going for a Crystal Palace asset, as I mentioned with the goalkeepers, I prefer going for Gaeta in goal and then having Kieran Trippier rather than going the other way and having Pope from Newcastle and then a Crystal Palace defender. And then finally, with Kilman, I don't think Wolves are the best team to target. They have some decent fixtures, such as Nottingham Forest in 3 game weeks, so you can see on screen with Kilman's fixtures there. But I just think there are better assets to go for. If you're going for a Wolves defender, there's an argument to go with Kilman, but to be honest, I just think there are better picks. There are more optimal selections, and there's good justification for spending a little bit more money going with those picks, like a Kieran Trippier, like a Reece James, maybe even upgrading all the way and going back to Trent Alexander-Arnold for Liverpool's fixtures coming up as well. Speaking of Liverpool, we are going to see a Liverpool asset in this team in the midfield, with Mohamed Salah making it into this draft, which is of course a big talking point at the moment as to whether it's worth going back to the Egyptian on your wildcard strategy. And of course, Liverpool's fixtures over the next couple of game weeks don't look the best. They in fact face the 3 toughest defences in the league when we look in terms of expected goals conceded so far this season in Brighton, Arsenal and Manchester City in Liverpool's next 3 games. The argument for going with Mohamed Salah seems to be that he of course is Mohamed Salah, and of course if you downgrade him to someone cheaper, it's a much easier move to make than it would be to upgrade someone like a Heung-min Son or a Kevin De Bruyne if that doesn't work out back up to Mo Salah. Personally, what do I think is the optimal strategy? I think Salah, owning him at the moment, looks like a good way to go. I know that he's got some tough fixtures, but Salah can do it against anyone. He's proven in previous seasons. We've seen with players like Heung-min Son just last week, just how players not necessarily being in form doesn't mean they can't return ridiculous hauls, and Son Heung-min did exactly that in Tottenham's last game. So going with Salah is probably what I do. I do also quite like the strategy of going with Kevin De Bruyne for the next two fixtures, and then maybe moving across before game week 12 or maybe even before game week 11 so that you can target Manchester City's nice fixture against Southampton. But at the moment, Salah would be the one in my wildcard draft to go for. And FPL Nacho touched on Mohamed Salah and why he thinks he's essential in the transfers video on Monday or earlier in the week, and so go and check that out if you want to know why he thinks that Salah is essential to have on your wildcard. Very, very impressive analysis there. We've also got James Maddison in this midfield, who, to be honest, is my must-have on a wildcard. I think Leicester's fixtures over the next 5 are unmatched. They're first in terms of attacking difficulty when we look over on the fixture analyzer on the website. And Maddison, of course, being the best asset to own, really, from that Leicester attack. But there is a slight argument, I think, for maybe even going for someone like a Daka up front, who looks like a very cheap price tag and could be a nice cheeky differential if you're looking to play a little bit more aggressive on your wildcard. And then finally, we've got Martinelli, who's up at 6.6 million now. Still looks like a great option to go for. Arsenal's fixtures don't look brilliant, but of course, when we're looking at the data, we're including that blank against Manchester City in game week 12, where they won't have a fixture. Arsenal are entering a tricky patch of fixtures as well. Martinelli didn't manage to grab anything against Brentford, but I do still think he offers tremendous value, and keeping him on my wildcard strategy would probably be what I was likely to do. There are some other options that don't make it into this size, such as Wilfried Zaha, that we'll touch on in just a moment. Another spoiler for a player in my wildcard team, but for the moment, I do like this midfield as far as it goes for a midfield 3. And then finally, up front, we're looking at Mitrovic, Erling Haaland, of course, and then Gabriel Jesus. So the algorithm is sticking with double Arsenal attack, which, to be honest, is going to be difficult for people to jump off, I think. And that's what makes the Game Week wildcard a little bit more tricky than it has been in previous game weeks and even in previous seasons, is the fact that you're going to have to jump off teams like Arsenal, teams like Liverpool even, who do have tough fixtures and so on paper aren't the ones to target, but are in decent form in Arsenal's case and look like they really could be worth holding on to. Gabriel Jesus, of course, scoring against Brentford. It looks like he'll continue scoring as well. It's just a case of whether you can target another forward like a Tony, like an Isaac. If he's back from injury, it is worth noting he may have picked up a knock whilst on international duty and has since returned to Newcastle. But there are other forward options. I mentioned Daka. There's Solanke as well at Bournemouth. There are other picks you can go for. We've only got 3 striker spots to fill, and how do you make the most of that? Going with Gabriel Jesus does by no means look like a bad option. Of course, on a wild card, you're going to be more inclined to make changes and not stick with the players you already have, assuming that you already own Jesus. But doing it is what the algorithm would suggest here is the most optimal strategy to go for. Let me know, anyone in the comments, if you are considering holding on to the Brazilian. And then on the bench for the wildcard, we've got another centre-back in Eric Dyer, who of course has 2 goals already so far this season. He's looked pretty impressive from those set pieces. Perisic delivering them, of course, has played into it massively, and Tottenham's new set-piece coach as well coming in seems to have done absolute wonders for them. So we could be expecting even more in terms of attacking returns for Eric Dyer. We've also got Andreas, who seems to be the bog standard midfielder pick to go for on the bench, 4.6 million. It's very well spent on him as a bench option. And then finally, we've got Pascal Gross, who is a little bit of a surprise to me. His underlying data so far has looked very good this season, which I'd assume is why he's making it into this side. I think that's a little bit too much money wasted on the bench, to be honest. Up at 6 million, I think he is now, Pascal Gross. I would not be spending that on a player who has some pretty tough fixtures. As you can see, Liverpool, Tottenham, Brentford's not an easy fixture as well over the next couple of games. But you never know. Could pay off. Not big on penalties would put me off a little bit too. I will not be going for Pascal Gross on my team, but let me know what you think of it. For game week 9, this is predicted 61 points this draft. If you want to check over the next couple of game weeks how much it's predicted to, you can check it out week by week over on the Assistant Manager tool on the website. But let's have a look at my team, shall we, and see how we compare with the algorithm side. These are the changes that I've made, and this is the side that I'd be going with. I've gone for a 3-4-3, making some of those changes for those centre-backs that I mentioned, with James and Trippier coming into the side with Nico Williams and Patterson down on the bench. I've also changed out Gaeta in goal in for Nick Pope, who was in the algorithm side as mentioned, and the reasoning for that earlier on in the video. One thing that's worth noting with the defence is that Patterson went off injured on international duty last night. He's currently priced at 4.1 million, but if it turns out he's going to be ruled out, I'd probably just change and go for someone like an Emerson if he looks like he could get a start in, or maybe just even go for a 3.9 million defender that I'm not going to need to use. But it is worth noting I have 3 players, of course, in Haaland, Martinelli and Cancelo, who will blank in game week 12 in this draft, so you're going to have to navigate that with the likes of Nico Williams, Andreas and one other player. But I'd be more inclined to make a transfer for one of those 3 assets in time for game week 12, and of course we'll have free transfers building up over 3 game weeks before then. I've also gone with Tony as my forward option rather than going with Gabriel Jesus. I think because Brentford haven't played that well in a while, I think that Tony is going a little bit more under the radar. I really like him as an option. If Isaac was fit, I'd be a little bit more inclined maybe to go with him, but him having a potential injury seals it for me that I think Tony's the one to go for, but I am sticking with Martinelli from the Arsenal attack. And then as I mentioned, I think Wilfried Zaha is a really, really nice pick to go for. Maybe a little bit of an argument to bench him this week for Nico Williams, given that Leicester haven't looked notoriously good going forward so far this year, and could even be potential for an attacking return for Nottingham Forest number 7, with how many shots to goals Leicester seem to be conceding with Danny Ward between the stakes. But at the moment, Zaha would be starting, and this would be how the team would look over the next majority of game weeks. So let me know down below in the comments, who do you think's team looks better, myself or the algorithms? Let me know, your Team Eddie or Team Algo down below in the comments. But that's going to wrap up Eddie versus the algorithm wildcard edition for game week 9. Thank you very much for tuning in, everyone. Leave me a like if you did enjoy it, and of course subscribe if you are new around here. But I'll see you soon for our next video. Goodbye, everyone.